In this video, we're going to talk about estimating the cost of replacing forage after a fire. If you're a livestock producer or rancher on annual rangelands in California, at some point you may be affected by fire. As a result, you may need to quantify that loss for an insurance claim. In this video, we'll walk you through the steps so that you can accurately identify those losses and come up with a value. We do have a website called California Rangelands Forage Loss that has a number of publications and resources on this topic. One is a handout titled Estimating the Cost of Replacing Forage Losses on Annual Rangelands. This publication will walk you through the steps that are outlined in this video. In addition, we have a Microsoft Excel worksheet that will be used to quantify the losses after the fire. A couple of things to point out after a fire. The first thing is the amount of forage loss is not just the year of the fire. Data has shown that in the year of the fire, of course, you have 100% forage loss. The year after the fire, you have between 50 and 70% forage loss, and the second year after the fire is roughly a 20% decrease in forage production. So how do we get started in estimating our forage losses? The first thing we need to do is we need to know how much forage was on site at the time of the burn. There's a couple of different ways to do that, but one way is to actually measure on site how much forage there is. So if you have an area adjacent to the burn that wasn't impacted, we can go over to that site and we can measure the amount of forage there. Here I am just outside of the burn area in an area that is basically representative of the pasture that was burned. I'm going to need a couple of supplies to measure the forage on site. The first thing I'm going to need is something like this. This is a 12-inch by 12-inch square. If you don't have this, you could make one. You can either do it out of PVC, you could even use a wire coat hanger, but basically you need to be able to measure 12 inches by 12 inches. Even if you don't have a square like this, you could also just use a ruler or a tape measure to measure 12 inches by 12 inches on the ground. You're also going to need some clippers or scissors to cut the grass. You'll need a small brown paper sack to put the forage in. You'll need a small little kitchen scale that can measure in grams, and a calculator. So, to get started, you'll take your 12-inch by 12-inch frame, you'll throw it out in roughly about 6 to 10 different areas in the unburned area, and you're going to clip the forage that's inside that 12-inch by 12-inch frame. I went ahead and clipped one frame and stuck it on the scale, and I ended up getting roughly 23 grams. Now, I take that 23 grams and I multiply it by 96. That will be the conversion factor to take grams to pounds per acre. So once I've done this in about 6 to 10 different locations, I can take the average of that, and then that'll give me a good number of how much forage was on site at the time of the burn. In this example, we had 23 grams, and so if we take that times our conversion factor of 96, we get roughly 2,200 pounds per acre of forage at the time of the burn. Now, if you don't have the ability to go out and measure on site, there are a couple of different ways that you can also find out that forage number. One way is to call your local University of California Cooperative Extension office. There's livestock advisors throughout the state that take annual forage production figures in many different counties. You could also use the USDA's soil survey website, and on there you can find your exact location, and based on the soil type you can determine what the forage production values are for that area. Once we have that number, now we're going to go back to the office and we're going to use the computer and the Excel spreadsheet to determine our forage losses.
We are back in the office at the computer, and the first thing we're going to do is go to the California Rangelands Annual Rangeland Forage Loss website. On this website, you'll have a publication, some Excel worksheets, as well as some other websites that'll help guide you through this process. The first publication is titled Estimating the Cost of replacing forage losses on annual rangelands. If at any point during the process you get stuck or need more information, this is a really good publication to refer back to. Now, before we go on to putting in the information into our worksheet and actually calculating the loss, we're going to show you one other place to determine forage production. So as we showed out in the field, if you have an area outside of the burn where you can actually use the 12-inch by 12-inch square and clip and weigh the forage to determine pounds per acre. If you can't do that process, another resource is the USDA Web Soil Survey. So if you Google Web Soil Survey, you will come across a website that looks much like this. The first thing you'll want to do is use the quick navigation tool on the left side of the menu bar to put in the address of the burn. So in this case, for this example, I am going to use Tonzi Road in Sutter Creek. And so I'm going to search and it'll show me this, this location on the aerial map. So here is Tonzi Road, and it intersects what is California Highway 49. And for this example, we'll say the burn was over on this side of the map. So the first thing you're going to want to do is use these tools across the top of the menu bar here. The one titled, this red box titled Define AOI by Rectangle. This is defining the area of interest. So basically we're going to click on that box and we are going to draw a square to define the area of the burn. Once we have done that, you'll see that the area that you just drew will be highlighted by the slash marks. And now we're going to go ahead and click on this tab across the top called Soil Data Explorer. Once we've clicked on Soil Data Explorer, it's going to show the different soil series, which are indicated by these different shaped polygons and these three letter codes that define the different soil types that occur in that area of interest. Now we want to make sure we're on the Suitabilities and Limitations for Use tab, and then in that tab down here we're going to scroll down to Vegetative Productivity. Within the Vegetative Productivity tab, we're going to scroll down here and you're going to see Range Production, and there's a couple of different ones. There is a above average year titled Favorable Year, an average production called Normal Year, and then a below average called Unfavorable. For this example, we're just going to go ahead and click on the Normal Year tab. And we are going to then click on Detailed Descriptions and View Ratings. So it's going to repopulate your map, and as you can see, that area of interest that I drew where the burn is, it has the different soil series titled by those three letters, and also has color variation showing the difference in forage production across those soils. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see that we have a couple of different soil series. Here's those map units, those three letter codes, the actual name of the soil series, and then here we are with the pounds of production per year. So it ranges anywhere from 1,300 pounds up to about 2,000 pounds based on those soil types across the landscape. In addition, it also breaks down that area of interest by acreage. So you can see within each one of those soil series is the number of acres that were in the burn, and for a total of roughly 71 or 70 acres that were in the total area of interest. So we can use that number. If you don't know how many acres were burned, you can use this tool to draw your area of interest, and it's a good way to calculate the number of acres. So if you remember from when we were out in the field and we did our clipping, we came up with 2,300 pounds per acre of forage produced, and based on last year's production, it was a favorable year, so above average, and so it lines up pretty nicely with what the average numbers are for those soil types. So now that we have the pounds per acre, we're going to go ahead and use our 2,300 pounds that we determined from out in the field. We have our area outlined as 70 acres that were in the burn. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to our Excel spreadsheet. So back on the California Rangelands website is the forage replacement worksheets. So we're going to go ahead and open that worksheet. There's a couple of tabs across the bottom of this worksheet, starting up with the instructions. It'll give you a little bit of guidelines on where you should put your data. But basically it's pretty easy. The only things you really need is total acres burned and also forage production values in pounds per acre. So we're going to move over to the second tab here titled Beginning Inventory, and on this tab you're going to see a number of sites. These are vegetation classifications of different types of grasslands, annual rangeland, blue oak woodlands in California. And so this is where we're going to put our forage production value number and also the number of acres burned. So in our example, we are in a annual grassland that's mixed with some oak woodlands. And so you can see this site number 5 titled Annual Grassland Hardwood Range. 0 to 10% slope and 0 to 25% woody cover, basically a patchy trees across the landscape, best defines the site where the burn was for this example. So we're going to put all of our data into this line just to keep it simple. For this example, we're just going to use this one classification, this one site, but for your particular situation, you may find yourself putting some values in multiple lines. So here we're going to go ahead and put 2,300 pounds, and here we're going to put 70 acres, and this is going to show you across the landscape how many pounds of forage that was lost in the fire. So 63,000 pounds is basically how many pounds of forage was lost as a result of the fire. Now we're going to go ahead and move over to the season, the first growing season after the fire. So if we click on that tab at the bottom of the worksheet, you'll see that the data gets transferred over automatically. So if you remember right, the first year of the fire, we had lost 63,000 pounds. That was the total forage lost as a result of the fire. So the first year after the fire, we also have a loss in total production. And it's basically about 50%. It can be anywhere from 40 to 70%. So you'll see that in this case, the usable forage is about half of what it was total. So we had 63,000 pounds, and so we have available 30,800 pounds after the fire, and we have a loss of 32,200 pounds. If we scroll over to the second growing season after the fire, you can see that the total usable forage is starting to go up close to the normal or the average, but it's still less than that 63,000 pounds. And so in year 2 after the fire, you have almost 47,000 pounds of available forage and a loss of 16,000 pounds of forage. And then typically by the third growing season after the fire, the site has fully recovered and you can expect normal forage production. So if we go ahead and click on the last tab, the substitution value, this is where all of those numbers will get carried over. So you can see at the end of the fire, or as a result of the fire, you lost 32 tons of forage. The first year after the fire, there was 16 tons lost, about 50% reduction in total forage production. And then the second growing season after the fire, you lose 8 tons of forage for a total loss of 56 tons. Now, to determine the value of this forage, there's a couple of figures that we use. The first is this cost to feed hay per ton. And this value of $13.40 is a number based on a 2009 report calculated by the use of using a feed truck to deliver that hay out to the animals. Now, this number does not account for labor. So if you need to put labor as a component of this value, you can adjust that number accordingly. The second value is the cost of replacing that forage, basically the cost of buying hay and getting it delivered. This is also a number that can be adjusted, and you can plug in the number based on your actuals. In this case, we're putting in a value of $225 per ton for the cost of delivered hay. So based on the total tons lost of 56 tons and the cost of feeding hay per ton at $13.40 and the replacement cost of $225 per ton, you can see the total cost of replacing the forage for those 3 years, the year of the fire, the first season after the fire, and the second year after the fire, is a total of just over $13,266. I hope this worksheet is of value to you. Again, if you have any questions, you can contact your local University of California Cooperative Extension office, and they can help guide you through this process. Thanks for watching.